doing my part in helping out with some how-to videos. This is my father-in-law's old Homelite, there we go, Homelite Textron, made in the USA, Charlotte, North Carolina. That's a that UT number 10505B, that's the model number, and then there's the serial number there. I'm not sure how to interpret Homelite serial numbers. I haven't looked it up, but I'm sure that this unit is probably from the early 80s based on the information that I've been able to gather. My father-in-law said, hey, you can have my old chainsaw, it won't start. Last time I tried to use it, I haven't tried to use it in a long time. He's over 65 and doesn't feel like he's going to be doing any chainsawing of anything anytime soon, so I brought it home after Christmas, and what I found was I pulled the spark plug here. That was a bit of a trip in itself because, as you can see, this handle angles up, and it's very difficult once you get the spark plug wire off to get the spark plug itself out. It's a really funky angle. I can't get a standard plug socket around it. I do this on my cars with no problem, but not so much here. But what I was able to do was get vice grips on it and squeeze down on the vice grips, and was able to turn it out and get the plug out. And with the plug out, of course, no compression, and so it's very easy to turn the engine over using the pull rope, and yanking the pull rope a few times with the spark plug grounded against the muffler right back here, no spark. So I started searching online for information about that, and what I found was, actually I was really pleased with what I found, and that is that the blue ignition coil, the blue Prestolite ignition coil, is notorious for just stopping, not having a spark anymore. Now you can validate that this is a Prestolite ignition coil because it says it right there, and because the flywheel also says Prestolite on it somewhere down in there. And so with that information, I was also able to learn a couple of troubleshooting tips. One of them is to pull the kill wire. The kill wire is attached, to this switch right here, which allows you to turn the chainsaw off. So I disconnected the kill wire, and then I put the starter back on, yanked the chain a couple of times, still no spark on the plug. I took the plug and attached it to the plug wire in my two-stroke weed whacker, and the plug is good. The plug has a spark, so I know that the plug is not the problem. So next up, I learned that these coils are very hard to find, no longer being made. You can find new old stock of them, but they cost a lot. I mean, I saw them listed for over $100. But I also learned that there are Chinese knockoffs of this ignition coil, and that yeah, your mileage might vary with them. They might work, they might not. They might work for a while and quit. The third thing I learned, thanks to Leon's Chainsaw Repair YouTube channel, was that there is a retrofit. You can get a replacement ignition coil and flywheel. The polarity is different on the magnets on the flywheel, and so you have to get the new flywheel to go with the new coil. If you try to use the new coil with the old flywheel, that dog won't hunt. So the last thing I learned was put the ignition coil in the oven for an hour at 200 degrees. You could do this with a little toaster oven. I did it with the oven in there in the kitchen after after dinner, after the kids had gone to bed, and just turned it on 200 degrees, and I put this ignition coil in for an hour. I brought it out here, I put it in, it's only held in by these two screws, here and here, so super simple. So with the coil back in, properly spaced from the flywheel so that the flywheel turns freely, then I put my spark plug back in to the into the spark plug cable, put it against the muffler, cranked it over, had a nice bright spark. Made my day, let me tell you. So, ignition coil, 1 hour, 200 degrees. Different theories. It might be that it's that there's a short circuit in a transistor in here that's being fixed by heat, being melted back together or something. The solder connections inside here might be being heated up and helped. There could be moisture that's seeped in past the laminate on the back side of the coil here. Hard to tell. There are lots of theories about what causes heat to fix this. Nobody seems to know for sure, but it works. Helpful hint for you. The spark plug cable itself, right here, the spark plug wire, actually is screwed into the ignition coil. So when you take the 2 screws out and the ignition coil is free and in your hand, if you just turn the ignition coil counterclockwise while you hold the spark plug wire still, then it will just unscrew right out of there. And that way you won't cook your spark plug wire. So next step after that was I put the starter back on. As you can see, it's just held in by 4 screws, which I'm having a bad time getting lined up one-handed. There we go, that's much better. So yeah, simple, 4 flathead screws, no problem. I'm just going to thread them back in by hand a minute so that they won't fall out. So my next step in troubleshooting the thing, I had a spark. So I screwed the spark plug back into the block here. Put a little extra tighten on it with my vice grips. I'm sure that there's a torque spec, but of course if you can't get a plug socket in, you're not going to be able to torque it accurately very well. So next up I took off the air cleaner cover here, took off the filter, which actually is not in that bad a shape. Can you tell that I've been cutting a few things up there? A little sawdust. Here's our carburetor. I took some carbon choke cleaner, sprayed it in right down there in the right there at the butterfly, and then I pulled full choke like that. That's the choke control right there. Pulled full choke on it, yanked it a couple times, and seriously on the second or third pull it fired up and it ran and burned that carb cleaner, and then it died. And so I did that 3 or 4 times, and then I put some fuel mix, 2-stroke, oil plus fuel mixture in here in the tank, and squirted some more cleaner in to the carb. Yanked on it, started it up, could not get it sucking fuel down the fuel line. Fuel line is right there. Okay, so then I took off this bracket so that I would be able to get to the top of the carb. All I did was take that screw out of the top of the carb. Underneath this plate is a gasket. I took the gasket off, and then I used my carb cleaner all over the passageways in the carb. I used it on the back side of this plate. I cleaned up both sides of the gasket with the carb cleaner. And then I pulled the fuel line off and stuck the little straw that is on your bottle of carb cleaner. I stuck the straw up the fuel line and gave it a good squirt because it felt like when I pushed that straw in, it actually felt like the fuel line was obstructed. So with the fuel line unobstructed, after having sprayed some cleaner in it, it was probably gummed up with 2-stroke oil, because I actually found gummy 2-stroke oil and a couple of the passageways inside the carb as well. But put the fuel line back on, put the gasket and the plate back on here, and then I sprayed some carb cleaner in again, pulled full choke on it. I yanked the rope 2 times, it started up, and it kept running. And I eased off on the choke. I eased it down to a half choke and then down to no choke, and I started giving her a little gas with the trigger here, and it has been smooth running ever since then. Gave it a little bar and chain oil here. This little pump guy right here pumps the bar and chain oil. However, as you can see, this is an easy automatic. That means it's supposed to be automatic oiling, so I probably don't need to push that little guy to get the bar and chain oil flowing. But I gotta tell you, if ever there was a case of they don't make it like they used to, this is one of those situations. Here, I mean, this thing has probably not been run in 15 years. I believe the last time that we ran it, me and my brothers-in-law and my father-in-law took a dead tree down in his yard, and at that time, I think he couldn't actually get this thing started, so the ignition coil problem might actually be 15 years old in this thing. It was on Thanksgiving Day. Has to have been in 04 or 05, and so I got to tell you, I'm just thrilled that I got the thing running. I texted him and told him that I had it running, and he asked me how, and I told him, well, I put the ignition coil in the oven. He said, well, I never heard of that before. I said, yeah, it's a thing that you read about that people find as a solution online, and seems to work for most people. So if you have one of these and you're trying to get it running, I would strongly recommend sticking the ignition coil in the oven for an hour. You got, nothing to lose by doing that. If you've got no spark, you're going to have to do something about the ignition coil if you have a known good plug. And so I'd say go for it. Thanks for watching. If this is helpful, look at some of my other videos. I periodically release how-to videos on here, but it's just whatever projects come along that need my time and attention around the house here. So it's completely random stuff. No regularly released videos here. It's just whenever I happen to do it. Everybody have a good one. See you next time.